Hello, this is Efren Bose, and I am the professor for Asian American Studies 591, otherwise known as Asian American Community Health Issues. So, just some brief introductions and some announcements before we actually begin the course. The syllabus is available online as of right now via the iLearn page. You are not required to buy the textbooks. Everything is available for free. Everything is either available through hyperlinks or through the library website. For those of you who are sophomores and are worried that you may get dropped from the class, don't worry about it. As long as you're in the class, you are fine. And then finally, as with all iLearn pages, as you've seen through about the last couple of semesters, iLearn pages are a massive work in progress, and things might change, and they actually probably will change with regards to appearance and speaking. And it's usually based on if and when I can arrange people to speak in the class. So, to give a little bit of an introduction to myself, I've actually been a lecturer in SF State's Asian American Studies since 2000, but I actually taught there for about a year, and then I came back in 2018 to specifically teach Asian American community health issues. In 2000, I taught Asian American history and Asian American culture. I have a bachelor's in ethnic studies with an emphasis in Asian American and African American studies, and also in chemistry, and from UC Riverside in 1995. I have a master's in sociology from UC Santa Barbara from 1998, and in 2013, I went back to school and graduated with my PharmD or Doctor of Pharmacy. My full-time position is actually the pharmacy director over at UC Berkeley in their student health services unit. Um, so what that actually means is that I run the outpatient pharmacy over within the clinic, but I also do consulting with regards to pharmaceutical services, with regards to the different healthcare units within UC Berkeley. That includes optometry and sports medicine, along with acute and primary care within the student health services. Some of my clinical interests include HIV/AIDS, women's health, adolescent health, chronic disease management, and health disparities. Health disparities including those involving people of color, the LGBTQ community, etc. Um, I also hold a couple of different clinical professor positions. I'm a volunteer over at UCSF School of Pharmacy. I'm an assistant clinical professor without salary, and I am also a volunteer clinical instructor at the Touro University College of Pharmacy, which is based in Vallejo. And I am certified in giving immunizations and in pharmacist-led contraception services. Um, Literally last week, UC Berkeley actually was started rolling out, giving out the COVID-19 vaccine to healthcare providers within UC Berkeley, and I was actually proud to be one of the first people to actually immunize those people within UC Berkeley. So, without further ado, this is the first week's agenda. We're going to go over a couple of case studies, then an introduction to the course, talk a little bit about the course assignments, and then the expectations of the class. Firstly, my expectations of you, the students, and finally, your expectations of me. So, the first case study, XX is a 62-year-old Filipino American woman with a history of uncontrolled diabetes mellitus type 2, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, undiagnosed psychiatric issues, congestive heart failure, and past history of stroke. She has a long-standing history of not being adherent to her medications because of unaddressed fears to her disease states and unwillingness to talk to providers about this, and also an inability of her providers to notice her fears and trepidation about her disease states. XX, even though she has chronically high diabetes, refuses to take any of her diabetes medications or checks her blood sugar because she's afraid of needles. Because of this, her blood sugars are chronically high. In an attempt to combat this naturally, she consults friends, relatives, and the internet to look for cures for diabetes. She doesn't talk to her healthcare providers about her fear of needles or about her fear of diabetes because she's afraid of looking stupid and she doesn't want to be seen by her doctors as being a bad patient. She also forgets that there is no cure for diabetes, even though her providers and other folks have told her this, but she still desperate to find a cure for this disease. In her search for a cure for diabetes, and in consultation with her friends, it's been she starts to believe that taro can actually be used to help cure her diabetes, and so she begins to eat taro with every single meal. However, she doesn't realize that the taro is actually making her diabetes worse. And soon after starting to eat the taro with every meal, she starts to complain of classic signs of uncontrolled diabetes. This includes tingling, burning sensations with regards to her nerves, um, basically in her hands and her feet, frequent urination, and exacerbated weight loss. Basically, it's unintentional weight loss, meaning that she's losing weight even though she doesn't really want to. After she told the providers about the taro, she was actually asked to stop eating the taro after telling providers about it because of the risk of her getting uncontrolled diabetes. However, even though she agrees in principle during her provider visits to not eat the taro, she does still eat it. XX also doesn't take her cholesterol medications and enjoys eating her favorite roast pork, otherwise in Tagalog known as lechon kawali, and other meats regularly. When asked by her doctors about this, she shrugs it off and just laughs. Yeah, she laughs and she's a little bit uncomfortable about this, but she still continues to eat her favorite foods. However, she also encourages her relatives to walk around the block to lose weight and to become healthy. But then when she's confronted about this, she herself refuses to do any kind of aerobic activity and laughs uncomfortably when confronted with this with this apparent inability to see that she's not doing what she doesn't do what she actually tells other people to do. So, on an exam by her cardiologist, XS, XX is told that she'll need open heart surgery because she has four clogged arteries in her heart. However, because of her uncontrolled diabetes, she's immediately hospitalized to get her blood sugars under control to improve her chances for survival. So this is actually really important because, and as we'll talk about later in the course, um, clogged arteries within the heart itself means that it's virtually impossible to get oxygen into her bloodstream, and so she also runs very high risk of having a heart attack because the blood is unable to pump all throughout the heart. While she's clearly frightened about the surgery and its possible outcomes, including death, again she refuses to talk to her providers about her fears, again for fear of looking like a bad patient. So, after a month of intense hospital intervention, XX undergoes this surgery, but unfortunately it's unsuccessful. After being in a coma for 4 days, she dies as a result of complications from the surgery, worsening congestive heart failure that she had previously, and also new onset of kidney failure. So, actually, XX was my mom, and she died about 18 years ago on February 7th, 2003. So, on the one hand, and to be really honest with you, I actually had framed this in a certain way. And these are some of the things that you will constantly talk about when you see a woman, in her position. That it was basically her, like she had individual agency, or that she had the choice to basically be non-compliant and non-adherent, and that's what killed her. So she's seen as, an immigrant woman who lacks the individual agency to actually take control of her health. She's afraid to ask questions. She's afraid of looking like a bad person. She was just knee-jerk deferring to people in positions of power, and that deference ended up killing her. She wasn't able to take control of her health because she didn't understand and didn't want to understand basic scientific principles, and she didn't really want to admit that she didn't know anything. She was non-compliant. She was a bad person. So all this, she herself was the main reason why that she wasn't able to take control of her health. And then finally, the cultural beliefs about her diabetes was what killed her. So if you look at this context, it's pointing the finger directly at my mother, and that she was a bad person. She didn't know how to ask questions. She didn't know that she did all of the wrong things, and so in sometimes like it could have been construed that she basically got what she deserved, and that's honestly a really messed up way of talking about about the situation, and I would actually like to flip the script regarding this. So you can actually frame what happened to my mom in a different way. Um, so my mom, in her way of trying to create resistance and to actually create some sort of agency, was creating her resistance against this power hierarchy of Western medicine. She trusted her own culture with regards to her health, and her healthcare providers were unfortunately unable to see this or unable to work with her in order to improve her outcomes. Did her providers actually do enough to understand what role both her being Filipina and also her lived experience as an immigrant woman dealing with diabetes, and did they understand what both of those roles have in playing in her ability to become adherent to medical protocols? Did her providers understand why she was afraid of diabetes? And probably the most important question, did my mother actually have agency to take control of her health? And so when you look about it in this example, who's to blame? Is it my mom? Was she the one who basically said, I'm gonna do whatever I want and I'm not gonna listen to anybody? And so again, it could be construed that she deserved what she got. Or really, is it more complicated than that? That's really there's a lot of other factors that haven't really been discussed with regards to um, health, Asian, particularly involving health among Asian Americans. And is there is there a more nuanced way to talk about her health and to talk basically about the health of other Asian Americans? So this is basically the core of the course and looking at Asian American community health issues, and part of why I actually really like to study this class, or like to study health disparities among people of color, among other minorities, and really just looking at health disparities in general. Obviously, for the purposes of this course, we're looking at Asian American community health issues. So obviously, we're going to be looking at some of the major health issues affecting Asian American communities, and you may notice that I'm actually deliberately using the plural with regards to Asian American communities. Um, and we'll talk about this more. You'll see this more in like in other lectures that I talk about Asian America and how it's a lot of people in mainstream white European American culture likes to basically combine all Asian Americans into one group. And we'll talk about some of the drawbacks of doing that and why it's so important to look at each of our communities as individual reasons why people have the health disparities and health outcomes that they do. So we're also going to look at some of the theoretical underpinnings that look at Asian American community health. We're going to look at the scientific method, so that for those of you who haven't really taken a college level, science course, we're going to look at what the traditional scientific method is with regards to positivistic um, Western science and some of the techniques used to look at the science, like how we explore the scientific method, and more importantly, what are some of the critiques of the scientific method and why the scientific method can be extremely problematic. We're going to start to look at reading and understanding journal articles and how and academic journal articles and why that becomes so important when looking at Asian American community health, especially since this is really sometimes like our only source of like good information regarding community health affecting Asian Americans. So as I've stated before, I have a master's in sociology from UCSB, and I actually almost completed my PhD in sociology when I was in Santa Barbara. And well, I should talk a little bit about sociological theory and why this is so important with regards to looking at sociology of health and medicine, and how that can actually give us the vocabulary and the methods to be able to look at health disparities among Asian Americans. And then finally, looking at, again, sociology of health and medicine. So we're also going to look at some of the unique problems of looking at Asian American health. As I talked about before, one of the biggest issues is looking at the, the concept of data aggregation and disaggregation. meaning what happens or what are the theoretical and power stakes that go into lumping all Asian Americans into one giant group, as opposed to looking at different groups within Asian American communities, and why that is also so important in looking at health disparities among Asian Americans. The difference between qualitative and quantitative methodologies. So quantitative methodologies, that means looking at, statistics with regards to being able to explain how Asian American or how health disparities are experienced by Asian Americans. And then also looking at the different types of qualitative methodologies. So meaning how do we talk to people about their health? And how do we use stories and interviews to look at Asian American health? And then finally, the funding issues with regards to studying Asian American health and how that can be a really big issue with regards to trying to understand what it means to look at Asian American community health. We're going to look at some of the more common health issues affecting Asian American communities. Some of these include issues that probably many of your parents and your grandparents and great grandparents have, including diabetes type 2, high blood pressure, otherwise known as hypertension, um, like asthma, COPD. We're also going to look at some of the more common disease states that affect youth, such as um, depression, anxiety, again, asthma. We're also going to look at coronavirus and the very unique issues that coronavirus has brought onto the Asian American community, and really how the history of how Asian Americans have been perceived with regards to their health actually helps to explain why we've been treated the way we have been over the past year and a half, as coronavirus has basically dominated the world landscape. And then finally, or the challenges of applying guidelines to treating common chronic disease states to Asian Americans. So we're going to really look at, like, how do you treat diabetes? How do you treat high blood pressure? How do you treat depression and anxiety? And what are the challenges to really applying these guidelines to making sure that Asian Americans who are affected by these chronic disease states are actually able to manage these conditions and able to live the healthiest lives possible. And then finally, we're going to look at lived experiences versus clinical expectations. So, as I talked about with my mom, the lived experience of my mom trying to understand how diabetes worked within her own cultural background and her mindset, and how that clashed against tradition, or not traditional, but the clinical expectations of how you treat chronic disease states, and how do you address people who could frankly be seen as non-adherent, but is that non-adherence because they're being insubordinate, or are they trying to understand what these diseases are within their own against their own culture? So we're also going to be looking at interventions for improving Asian American community health. I have a couple of lectures given by folks who work with different community organizations to look at unique issues affecting the Chinese American community and the Filipino American community. Complementary and alternative medicines. So we're not just going to look at the Asian American, like, traditional Western medicine. We're also going to look at traditional Chinese medicine. We're going to look at Ayurveda, chiropractic, herbal medicine, and how that helps to improve health among Asian Americans, and then also some of the challenges of using complementary medicine against the philosophy of Western biomedicine. Asian American women's health, Asian American feminisms. Again, women's health is one of my like clinical interests, and really looking at how the way that women are treated in Asian American communities, and what are the challenges to making sure that women actually receive health that A is improves their outcomes, but B is also very respectful of their different cultural and religious backgrounds. LGBTQ, Asian American health issues. So looking at the different types of intersections and intersecting intersecting issues among Asian Americans who belong to different minority communities. Asian American mental health issues. So looking at, you know, why is it so difficult for Asian Americans to seek help about anxiety and depression? Why are there high rates of suicide among Asian American youth? Why is it so difficult for Asian American men to talk about their health issue or mental health issues and their physical health issues? Asian American elder issues. So we'll talk a little bit about dementia. We'll talk a little bit about elder abuse and the various ways in which perceptions of how we treat our elders in Asian American communities clashes with expectations of treating the elderly in American society. Violence in the Asian American community. I'm hoping to be able to talk a little bit about that in this course. And then finally, cancer in Asian American communities. So again, with the caveat, depending on if I'm able to get folks to actually be able to lecture or to find information, I may have to change the schedule around in order for us to fit everything into this one course. And again, this course is an introduction, so this shouldn't be seen as a end all be all for Asian American community health. That it really is just an introduction because there are so many people who actually look at different aspects of Asian American community health as their life's work. And this is just a brief little taste of what the unique challenges are to studying Asian American health are. So we're also going to go a little bit about clinical and basic science. And again, don't worry about having any kind of science background. You will not need it for this class. Again, it's it's a way for us to be able to talk about different health issues in ways that actually make sense. And I hope to be able to explain very complicated health phenomena in a way that makes sense and is easy to understand. So we'll talk basic principles, scientific principles in biology, chemistry, biochemistry, physiology, and because I'm a pharmacist, pharmacology and therapeutics. So therapeutics is basically what's known as the science of pharmacy, or how like what happens when you take a medication, and how does that affect your like how does it work the way that it does, and sometimes why does it not work the way that you expect it to. And again, you don't need any kind of science background for this class. Again, all of these scientific phenomena are going to be explained in ways that are easy to understand, and you're not going to be graded on your science on any kind of science hardcore scientific knowledge. That it's just a way for us to find a common vocabulary in order for you to understand different scientific phenomena. So the layout of the course. So this course is what we call bisynchronous, meaning that there's gonna be a lot of asynchronous lectures, meaning that a lot of lectures are already pre-recorded on YouTube, and all you have to do is just go ahead and listen to them whenever you have the time. However, there are going to be several weeks throughout the course where we will have mandatory Zoom lectures, and these are tentatively held for Monday afternoons, roughly between 5 to 6:15. Sometimes it's usually 5 to 6 or 5:15 to 6:15. Um, Again, this will be mandatory for you to attend. A lot of your assignments, especially with regards to participation, will be online through iLearn. Most of these are either going to be discussion posts or forums or just short quizzes. The discussion posts and quizzes will be used to determine your participation grade, along with real-time discussions, again, through Zoom. I'm hoping to have guest speakers, and again, there are going to be quite a few YouTube videos and other resources for you to check out online as we explore different aspects of Asian American community health throughout the course. So this is the grading rubric for the course. 60% of your course the grade will be determined by participation. So that includes, including attending the Zoom lectures as well as completing weekly assignments. And then you will have two midterm papers, one that will be due mid-March, and then one that will serve as basically your final exam. Both of those papers are going to be 20% each for a total score of 100%. And then you will have opportunities throughout the course to do some extra credit with a maximum of 5%. So when we talk about the course assignments, 60% again, and the or the majority of your course will be based on participation. That means to actively participate in discussions either through real life through Zoom or through iLearn forums. You must attend all mandatory Zoom lectures to get full credit for the participation. Posing questions either through the forums or through your assignments to show that you've actually done the reading and you've actually thought and processed the readings that have been in the lecture. Um, I strongly encourage you to put yourself out there to ask questions that you may think are like, especially like if there are things you don't understand, you feel embarrassed about. I strongly encourage you to go ahead and ask them anyway. A lot of times, a lot of people do have the same questions and they're just as afraid as you are. I strongly encourage you to ask questions because this is really how everyone's going to learn. So the most important thing about participation is that the assignments are going to be very strictly time dependent, meaning that you'll have a very limited time for you to complete each assignment and then turning it in. And so the thing is that unfortunately, because everything is time dependent, I'm not going to allow any makeup assignments if you're late in turning in if you're late in turning in an assignment. Um, I ran into this problem last semester and I got bombarded with a massive amount of makeups that had to be done at the end of the semester, and unfortunately, that's not fair to folks who have actually been have been participating in the course throughout the semester, and it's not fair for them that they've actually been doing the work as expected, and it's not, and that means that you know it gives people who it rewards people for the laziness to allow them to do it later. So I'm not going to allow that anymore in this semester. Again, there's going to be two midterm papers. They're going to be 20% of your grade with a total possible score of 40%. Two research papers, anywhere from 8 to 10 pages each. They're going to cover topics that are either through, obviously, the first midterm is going to go through the first half of the semester. Your final will cover the second half. To get full credit for these papers, it requires engagement with the course lectures, readings, and the discussions. So this is the rubric of participation, making sure that, providing thoughtful statements in order to get an outstanding grade, and questions showing mastery or desire to master concepts presented in lectures and presentations. Actively participates in discussions and respects differences in opinion. And then you can see here that meets expectations and does not meet expectations. So the thing is that basically you will get the grade you deserved based on how strongly you interface with the course. Um, the less the less engaged you are, the less likely you will pass the class. Okay? And most importantly, respecting others and their opinions, especially if they don't agree with you, that's the most important thing in this class to me. Again, with regards to extra credit assignments, opportunities will exist throughout the semester to get extra credit. Again, you have um, the most that you can actually get is a maximum of 5%. Examples of these assignments include talks that are actually held by SF State faculty who are affiliated with Asian American Studies, and not necessarily people who are in the department, but there a lot of stuff aligns very strongly with Asian American Studies. Seminars, health fairs, even movies and blog posts that can also be considered um, extra credit assignments, where you like give me a synopsis of an event, or you talk about okay what happens in these like in a blog post or in an article or in a or in a movie, and telling me what the relevance is with these things in Asian America and Asian American community health issues. So these are the grade cutoffs for the class. I do round to the hundredth of a point. So meaning that in order, like what is considered an A is 89.95% to 100%, and then B 79.95 to 89.94, etc., etc. If you choose to take the class for credit, no credit, you must score above a C minus, meaning you must score above 69.95% to get credit. If you're an Asian American Studies major, you cannot take the course for credit, no credit. You must take the class for letter grade. In order to get a pass or a credit in the course, you must submit for both research papers. Oh, I'm sorry, there is no final presentation, but you must actively participate throughout the course. So being like submitting both of your research papers and passing your participation means that you will pass the class. Um, not no submission for any assignment means an automatic fail unless you've talked to me prior to the due date. And again, this is talked about more in the syllabus. My expectations of you. Most importantly, I expect you to be professional. So make sure, obviously you're doing your own work. No plagiarism. There are links. All of your paper links will be through Turnitin, which automatically makes checks for plagiarism. And if there is plagiarism and it's confirmed, you automatically fail that assignment. No exceptions. Again, in order to get credit in the class, you must submit for all assignments and maintain minimum standards. Work hard and you'll get the grade that you deserve, meaning that it is actually much easier just to put the full effort into the class. You actually work a lot harder to try to do the bare minimum. And the thing is, like, it actually shows that it's much, much easier just for you to be able to write a 10-page paper on something that you feel very passionate about than try to barely write a 6.5-page paper, just barely covering the surface. It'll be much easier for you to talk about within the course to be able to do assignments that you really like that really speak to you in one way or another. Again, ask questions. If you're confused or not sure, go ahead and ask. And for the most part, there's no such thing as a stupid question, unless it's something that's actually within the syllabus. Otherwise, I will tell you to look at the syllabus before you ask me. Okay, my expectations for you include to stay focused. Again, respecting differences in opinion. No ad hominem attacks, meaning don't attack someone personally if they have an opinion that is different than yours. Actively engaging in discussions. Again, turning in your assignments on time. Under extreme circumstances, if there's something that happens where you cannot turn in one of your papers on time, let me know ASAP and we can work something out. Again, these have to be something that is an emergency that you were not able to plan for. Unacceptable excuses for not turning in your assignments on time include procrastination, poor time management, or personal drama. Actually, I had students who have said that they were not able to turn in assignments because they were having drama with their partner. That is not acceptable. Like, I expect you to be able to complete your assignments, unless there is a matter of life or death with someone that's very close to you. I expect you to have fun in the course, and ultimately, I just want you to pass because really, there is no reason for you to fail this course unless you really just are lazy, or you just don't feel like putting in the effort, and then you will get the grade you deserve. Um, if there are issues, I will try to work with you to make sure that I give you the highest possibility for you to pass the course. Okay. So your expectations of me, again, let me know what you want and what you expect to learn in the course. Office hours are one way to reach me. Unfortunately, I forgot to change this in the presentation. Office hours are only available through Zoom, and you must schedule these with me one-on-one, and yeah, we can plan these accordingly. Email is the best way to contact me otherwise. If you get confused or don't understand the assignments, again, please feel free to ask me questions. All right, so now we're going to talk about case study B. So QQ is a 70-year-old retired Filipino-American male with a history of high blood pressure, diabetes, mellitus type 2, obesity, and high cholesterol. He was previously widowed, married a second wife roughly about 10 years ago, and has a teenage son who keeps him busy. So QQ is in good contact with his providers on a regular basis and comes in for physicals once or twice a year to manage his health. He and his providers have come up with a plan, even during coronavirus, to design a regimen that works well with his daily routine. Although his current disease states sometimes worry him at times, he knows how to contact his providers if he has any issues or questions about his labs or his medications. It also helps that he embraces technology and always has a new smartphone and has a wife and a son who nags him about his medications to make sure that he's taking them on a regular basis. QQ has become more active as of late. He walks at least once or twice a day for 2 to 3 miles. He does weights several times a week, as well as actively maintains his properties. He's well known in his community for walking around in the neighborhood, and he has strong network connections with his neighbors and his family. He maintains a daily log of his blood sugars, which are very good, and he takes his medications at the same time every day, um, especially since his wife and his son bug him about it every day. He does admit to overindulging at times, but is actively trying to lose weight. He's also recently undergone a knee replacement to improve his mobility, which he's recovered from very well. While he was afraid of the surgery at first, he was able to get support from his family, and he actually asked his providers a number of questions about the surgery, and he was able to go through the surgery without any major complications. He's resumed his normal activities of walking at least 30 to 60 minutes a day. Before coronavirus, he was working out at the local senior center every day, and he also actually has good friendships with the people there. He also lovingly maintains a backyard garden full of Filipino vegetables, which he uses to cook many of his favorite dishes, as well as a calamansi tree that his eldest son gave him over 20 years ago, which threatens to take over the front yard. Because of this, his insulin dosing for his diabetes has dropped significantly, and he's slowly reducing the dose of his other medications for his other chronic disease states. Finally, it also helps that QQ has a son who's a pharmacist, and has helped to streamline his medications, and also works with him to make sure he can maintain or manage and understand his disease states. He knows that because of such strong social and medical support, he expects to live a very long and happy life. And if you haven't noticed, QQ's my dad, and I'm his pharmacist. Okay, that concludes the lecture, and be prepared to just check your emails for new assignments. So these are the next steps. So there's going to be a mandatory introductory form on the iLearn page, which includes a one-paragraph introduction with a selfie. Again, the syllabus is available on the iLearn. The textbook, Handbook on Asian American Health, is available on iLearn for your perusal. The next videos to watch include Filipinx American Health, Intro to Asian American History and Health, and then finally YouTube videos on social determinants of health and Introduction to Clinical Studies. On the 25th, we will have our first Zoom lecture. All right, thanks so much, and please make sure to complete the introductory form by the 25th. Thank you.